Welcome to Surrender School. The Gifts of Imperfection. Session 5.
Okay, so we are going to be diving in to what this book is all about, which is guideposts. All of the guideposts that she's going to talk about are interconnected and related to each other. My goal is to talk about them individually and collectively. I want us to explore how each of them works on its own and how they fit together. We'll spend the rest of the book unpacking terms like perfection so that we can understand why they're so important and what often gets in our way living a wholehearted life. Or I would say a life in recovery. Okay. So we're going to cover two guideposts today. The first one that we're going to talk about is cultivating authenticity, letting go of what people think. So the first thing I want to go over is in the old edition, it's, 2/3 of the way down on page 49. And in the new edition, it's the top of page 67. And she says, authenticity is not something we have or don't have. It's a practice, a conscious choice of how we want to live. Authenticity is a collection of choices that we have to make every day. It's about the choice to show up and be real, the choice to be honest, the choice to let our true selves be seen. And again, it's that word, and we keep finding that word over and over again, the practice word, the P word. It's going to be the P word, the practice word. Again, authenticity is a practice. You don't snap your fingers and all of a sudden you are now authentic forever and ever. It is a practice, and we try and be authentic. We make mistakes, we correct them, we move forward, but it's a practice, just like everything else in recovery is. The next thing I want to read is the next paragraph. In the middle of the next paragraph, very bottom of page 49, top of 50 in the old edition, and further down on page 67 in the new edition. If I am full of self-doubt or shame, I can sell myself out and be anybody you need me to be. I know for my own experience that self-doubt, shame, and not enoughness are corrosive to my recovery. I can't sell myself out and expect to recover. I can't pretend and then work the steps. I have to be authentic. Well, I can, I just won't get anything out of it.
Yeah.
Okay. I have to work the steps on who I truly am. And as embarrassing as it is, I used to brag about my ability to be a chameleon, my ability to be whoever you wanted me to be. I thought that was an asset. And it's not, because what wound up happening is I got into my 40s and I had no freaking idea who I was. And it made recovery even that much more difficult. The next thing I want to read is in the next paragraph, mid-next paragraph, top of page 50, or in the new edition, it's mid 67. Most of us know that choosing authenticity in a culture that dictates everything from how much we're supposed to weigh to what our houses are supposed to look like is a huge undertaking. And for myself, it can be really exhausting. Just like recovery, we have to be extra diligent about our self-care around this stuff. When we step out authentically in a culture that has a lot of rules and prescribed ways of looking, being, acting, thinking, It takes a lot of psychic energy to be able to do that. At least it does for me. And I have had to learn how to take care of my authentic self. And sometimes that has meant not being my authentic self in situations that are not safe for me. I have had to recognize that it's not always emotionally safe for me to do that. And what is it? There's a phrase in the big book that Bill W. talks about, that's like leading with the chin in a boxing match, where you're just asking to be clobbered. I really have had to learn how to take care of myself in all situations. And not all of them are okay for me to be my authentic self. Most of them are, but not all of them. And I have to have discernment, and I rely on my higher power to help that with me. Okay, next thing I want to go over. All right, and I'm going to take these one little piece at a time, just because I think they're really important. The first thing is mid-page 50 in the old and the top of page 68 in the new edition. Authenticity is the daily practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we are. I love this definition. It feels so right to me. It feels like an ultimate loving act, embracing who I truly am. Next, she says, choosing authenticity means cultivating the courage to be imperfect, to set boundaries, and to allow ourselves to be vulnerable. It means exercising the compassion that comes from knowing that we are all made of strength and struggle, and nurturing the connection and sense of belonging that can only happen when we believe that we are enough. Again, courage, compassion, and connection. These are our gifts, but we have to work for them. And I worked for them through my step work, through my connection with my higher power, through listening at meetings. Recovery is a perfect way to cultivate these gifts for ourselves. Next, it's just the next paragraph, bottom of 50 or on page 68. Authenticity demands wholehearted living and loving, even when it's hard. Even when we're wrestling with the shame and fear of not being good enough, and especially when the joy is so intense that we're afraid to let ourselves feel it. To me, it sounds like authenticity needs to be practiced even when we are uncomfortable. Just like abstinence and recovery. Discomfort doesn't mean that something's wrong. It doesn't necessarily mean to stop. And I think we really get tripped up in discomfort in this program. And living wholeheartedly, living in recovery, living abstinently, we have to get comfortable with discomfort. Now, I'm not talking again about leading with the chin or doing these things in a place that's not safe. But emotional discomfort doesn't necessarily mean we should stop. It does mean we need to ask for help from our fellows, from our higher power, but it doesn't necessarily mean we should stop. Further on, let's see, let me get myself straight here. It's the kind of a third of the way down in the old book on page 51. And it's on the top of page 69 in the new book. She says, choosing authenticity is not an easy choice. E. Cummings wrote, quote, to be nobody but yourself in a world which is doing its best night and day to make you everybody but yourself means to fight the hardest battle which any human being can fight and never stop fighting, unquote. She says, staying real is one of the most courageous battles that we'll ever fight. This actually, it's funny that she wrote this. This is one of my favorite E. Cummings quotes. I was introduced to it in my 20s, when I had no freaking idea what it really meant. But as I've grown older and as I've gone through the different eras of my life, I can really see what that means. And being in program, I have had to battle all those shoulds and you ought tos and good girls do this and proper house guests do that. Proper house guests don't ask to be taken to the grocery store so they can buy their food so they can remain abstinent while they visit someone. But I have had to do that. That is authentically who I am. I require that kind of self-care. And if I reject that, then I guarantee a relapse for myself. If I embrace who I am and the fact that I need that, and I take care of myself around that, I get to stay abstinent. I get to stay in recovery. But it takes a lot of courage to do that. Or at least it does for me. It takes a lot of courage for me to do that. But that's what she's talking about here in this guidepost, giving up, letting go of what people think. The next thing I want to read is mid 51 for the old and mid 69 for the new. When we choose to be true to ourselves, the people around us will struggle to make sense of how and why we are changing. A little bit further down, it's not so much the act of authenticity that challenges the status quo. I think of it as the audacity of authenticity. We don't want our authenticity to be perceived as selfish or narcissistic. This recovery is really hard on the folks around us when we change. I have to let go of other people's discomfort of me. I can't let other people's discomfort stop me from recovering. And I have done that more times than I care to admit. I have let other people's discomfort stop me. And I can't do that. I'll just tell a brief little story. My wife volunteers as a docent at the Desert Botanical Gardens down in the valley, and we had just gotten legally married, and they wanted to throw a party for us, a reception for us. Of course, it was a surprise. We didn't know what was going to happen. And we came to the regular scheduled docent party thing that they do. You know, I've got my little dinner in my bowl that I bring with me because it's a potluck and I don't do potlucks well. So we come into this and they have this gorgeous spread. They had a wedding cake made. They went way out of their way. It was just amazing. But Linda doesn't eat cake. And I had to let it be okay that I didn't eat a piece of that cake, even though those people so lovingly went out of their way for me. And I almost started crying. I was so blown away by it. but I didn't eat a piece of the cake. I cut the cake. And gave everybody else a piece of the cake, but I didn't have a piece. And I have to be okay with that. And I have to let it be okay if other people are disappointed about that or feel funny about that or whatever. I have to let it be okay. And that has taken a lot for me. I mean, I was in my late 50s before I was willing to do that. Okay. Next thing I want to talk about is on the very top of page 52 or the top of page 70. Sometimes when we push the system, it pushes back. The pushback can be everything from eye rolls and whispers to relationship struggles and feelings of isolation. There can also be cruel and shaming responses to our authentic voices. And the immediate thing that comes to my mind when I think about that is when we start trying to follow a food plan again, we get ourselves abstinent, and the cruel responses are things like, well, how long do you think it's going to last this time? Or why is this time going to be any different than the 6 times you've done this before? That is so that is so cruel and so hurtful. And I know most of the time the people that say stuff like that don't know how cruel and hurtful it is. Sometimes they do. But that is really difficult to handle particularly when we've been in this program in and out, or in this program a long time, and we're trying something new and we're trying to get there. And the people around us just, I mean, and you can't hardly blame them. We're addicts and we make a lot of promises, and we break a lot of promises, and they've been front row seats to all of it. And they don't want to be disappointed either. And it just pops out, and we have to let that be okay. And that takes a lot of strength. And fortunately, we have each other to talk about with this stuff. Fortunately, we have each other. Next thing I want to talk about is further down, let's see, the bottom of page 70 in the new, and about halfway down on page 52 in the old. I also found that men and women struggle when their opinions, feelings, and beliefs conflict with our culture's gender expectations. If women want to play it totally safe, we have to be willing to stay as small, quiet, and attractive as possible. If men want to play it safe, they need to stop feeling, start earning, and give up on meaningful connection. Cultural expectations, period. You know, I tried playing it safe in program. There were rules in program that I didn't find useful for myself, and actually kept me from recovering. But I wanted to play it safe. I wanted to belong. You know, it was a cultural expectation, even in program. And we have to let ourselves stay aware of that so that we don't do that to anybody else in program, so that they can be their authentic self in program, just like we want to be our authentic self in program. Let's see, the next paragraph, it's toward the bottom on page 52 or the top of page 71 in the new. The thing is, authenticity isn't always the safe option. Sometimes choosing being real over being liked is all about playing it unsafe. It means stepping out of our comfort zone. I have to have balance when going outside of my comfort zone. I have to take baby steps. I can't just dive into the deep end of the pool without knowing how to swim. I have to be balanced about this. So for example, it's okay to take a step over my comfort zone, but not going 100 miles past my comfort zone. You see what I'm saying here? Just a little bit at a time. And if I'm willing to do that, the payoff in my recovery is fantastic. It's wonderful, but I cannot, like I said, I can't dive into the deep end without knowing how to swim. I have to do this baby steps. Next thing I want to read is the very bottom of 52 and mid 71. It's easy to attack and criticize someone while he or she is risk-taking. Cruelty is cheap, easy, and rampant. It is also chicken shit. I just love that line. Mm-hmm. It's that man in the arena stuff, that old Teddy Roosevelt quotes about the man in the arena. And social media has built a multi-billion-dollar industry on chicken shit criticizing. And we really have to, what this reminds me of almost a little bit? It's like the grade school cliques when the mean girls would, go over to the side and say mean things, about someone who was trying something new, or, in my own story, I had to get to fat camp in order to even try and play sports in any way. I refused to do it in front of normal weight people because of what they would say to me, because of me trying to do something where I probably looked pretty ridiculous. But that chicken shit criticizing, I have to remember that when I encounter it for myself. Because it's really easy to criticize when you never try anything yourself. I have to remember that. Next thing I want to talk about is on the top of page 53 in the old and about 2/3 of the way down on page 71 in the new edition. Let's see. When we go against the grain and put ourselves and our work out in the world, some people will feel threatened and they will go after what hurts them most: our appearance, our lovability, and even our parenting. Courage is telling our story, not being immune to criticism. Staying vulnerable is a risk we have to take if we want to experience connection. And I think what she's talking about here is our softest, most vulnerable parts. I have had to figure out how to be vulnerable and tough all at the same time. That's a high wire act. Next thing I want to read is a little bit further down, top of page 72 in the new edition and mid 53 in the old. Our unexpressed ideas, opinions, and contributions just don't go away. They are likely to fester and eat away at our worthiness. Caution: if you trade in your authenticity for safety, you may experience the following: anxiety, depression, eating disorders, addiction, rage, blame, resentment, and inexplicable grief. I resonate so much to the idea that addiction is connected to stuffing down my authentic self. I had to do something stuffing all that stuff down, and food was really good at doing it. It was really great at doing it. But I don't want to live that way anymore. Mid 72 in the new, toward the bottom on page 53 in the old. Being true to ourselves is the best gift we can give the people we love. I'm going to read that one again. Being true to ourselves is the best gift we can give the people we love. When I let go of trying to be everything to everyone, I had much more time, attention, love, and connection for the important people in my life. And a crop load less of resentment. I mean, that's really true for me. Trying to be everything to everyone led me to be really pissed off, bitter, and resentful. And I did it to myself, which even made me madder. Now, when I am true to myself, I can see that what I'm doing is I'm nourishing myself. I'm replenishing myself so that I can be there for others. I know it's trite, but it's true. We can't do anything for anybody else if we don't take care of ourselves first. It is true. It's trite, but it is true. Next thing I want to read is top of page 54 in the old and the bottom of page 72 in the new. Stand on your sacred ground. Saying this little mantra helps me remember not to get small so other people are comfortable, and not to throw up my armor as a way to protect myself. Sacred ground. That to me is absolutely beautiful. My abstinence is my sacred ground, and I stand on it, even when people are uncomfortable with me being it. Making others comfortable at my own expense was one of those lifelong conceptions that Bill W. talks about having to throw out the window if we're going to recover. Sacrificing myself on the altar of other people's comfortableness had to go. It just had to go. And quite frankly, making other people comfortable doesn't really do much for them anyway. They may feel more comfortable in the moment, but maybe what is more loving is to make them just a smidge uncomfortable. Maybe that's the most loving thing we can do. Next thing, under the get inspired thing. So it's the top of page 73 in the new and a little bit further down on page 54 in the old. Courage is contagious. You have to be brave with your life so that others can be brave with theirs. Courage is contagious. Attraction, not promotion. Be a radiant recovery exemplar. You being in recovery is giving permission to other people to do it as well. It not only shows them that it's possible, but it gives them permission to do what they need to do to get there. Courage is contagious. I think I want to make a bumper sticker of that. Stick it on the back of my car. Last thing I want to talk about in this chapter is under the get going section. That's further down on page 73 in the new and the last paragraph of page 54 in the old. I try to make authenticity my number one goal when I go into a situation where I'm feeling vulnerable. I might get my feelings hurt, but I rarely feel shame. You know, when I read that, it's the first thing I thought of is it feels a little bit like running towards the fire instead of running away from it. That's what that sounds like to me. And I cannot say by any stretch of the imagination that I actually do that in any meaningful way all the time, but I'm baby stepping it there. I'm taking my baby steps. All right, next chapter. Guidepost number 2, cultivating self-compassion, letting go of perfectionism. Bottom of page 55 or the top of page 75. Where perfectionism exists, shame is always lurking. In fact, shame is the birthplace of perfectionism. The problem is that when we don't claim shame, it claims us. And one of the ways it sneaks into our lives is through perfectionism. Perfectionism was my misguided attempt to protect myself. Period. End of story. I thought if I could be perfect, everything would be okay, and I would never feel humiliated or shamed ever again. It wasn't true, but I thought it. Next thing is further, like a third of the way down on page 656 or on mid page 75 for the new edition. Perfectionism is not the same thing as striving to be your best. Perfectionism is the belief that if we live perfect, look perfect, and act perfect, we can minimize or avoid the pain of blame, judgment, and shame. We use our perfectionism as a shield. Quite frankly, my obsession with my weight loss, appearance, all that crap was all about this. I thought that it would make the bullies stop. It would make the teasing stop. It would make me lovable. And of course it didn't. Well, one, I can't be perfect. And two, bullies are going to bully no matter what. They'll just find something else. Okay. Next thing I wanted to talk about is it's just the next paragraph. Perfectionism is not self-improvement. Perfectionism is at its core about trying to earn approval and acceptance. Healthy striving is self-focused. How can I improve? Perfectionism is other-focused. What will they think? I'm going to say this again because this is so freaking important. Healthy striving is self-focused. How can I improve? Perfectionism is other-focused. What will they think? It's the growth mindset versus the performance mindset. Growing and learning versus getting an A. One is all about me and my experience. Perfectionism is all about other people. Not my experience, other people. And then I make being okay based on how they react to me. That's a victim stance, and I do not want to live there. Next thing is very bottom of page 56 in the old and mid page 76 in the new. Research shows that perfectionism hampers success. In fact, it's often the path to depression, anxiety, addiction, and life paralysis. Life paralysis refers to all the opportunities we miss because we're too afraid to put anything out in the world that could be imperfect. It's also all of the dreams that we don't follow because of our deep fear of failing, making mistakes, and disappointing others. And it makes me sad when I think about all of the things I never did because I couldn't be perfect at it. I missed out on so much because if I couldn't do it perfectly the first time, I wasn't going to do it. And I missed a lot. I missed a lot that way. Next thing. Top of about a third of the way down on page 57 in the old and the bottom of page 76 in the new. Perfectionism is a self-destructive and addictive belief system that fuels this primary thought. If I look perfect, live perfectly, and do everything perfectly, I can avoid or minimize the painful feelings of shame, judgment, and blame. There is nothing to add to that. That is perfectly worded. Absolutely perfectly worded. Amen. 3,000 exclamation points. The next thing, just the next paragraph. Perfectionism is self-destructive simply because there is no such thing as perfect. Perfection is an unattainable goal. Additionally, perfectionism is more about perception. We want to be perceived as perfect. Again, this is unattainable. There is no way to control perception, regardless of how much time and energy we spend trying. This is me again, trying to control the uncontrollable, other people's perceptions of me. First class ticket to Doritoville, people. It will get you there every time. Being more concerned about what other people think of me than what I think of me. No, that's a trip to the candy aisle. Next paragraph. Perfectionism is addictive because when we invariably do experience shame, judgment, and blame, we often believe it's because we weren't perfect enough. So rather than questioning the faulty logic of perfectionism, we become even more entrenched in our quest to live, look, and do everything just right. Yeah, I'm gonna just try harder. You're never going to catch me short again, right? How we say that kind of stuff to ourselves. Next paragraph. Feeling shamed, judged, and blamed, and the fear of these feelings are realities of the human experience. Perfectionism actually increases the odds that we'll experience these painful emotions and often leads to self-blame. It's my fault I'm feeling this way because I'm not good enough. Not because someone was being an a-hole, right? Not because someone had unrealistic expectations of us, not because someone was being a jerk, or not because someone was having a bad day. It's because I wasn't good enough. I have been trying now purposefully to consciously embrace my imperfections. Some of you have already heard me talk about my role of acceptance. When you lose weight, you have loose skin, you have loose tissue, and unless you have it surgically removed, it's just going to be there. That's my role of acceptance. That is my imperfection, and I revel in it because it is a sign to me that I am taking care of myself. I did something to create that role. I did something to create I feel like my entire skin is it's just dropping off of my skeleton. And that's just between aging, gravity, and, having lost and gained and lost and gained and lost and gained, 80 pounds. That's what happens. That's what it looks like. And now I revel in it because it means I'm doing something right. Next thing is at the very bottom of page 57 or the bottom of page 77. When we become more loving and compassionate with ourselves, we begin to practice shame resilience. We can embrace our imperfections. It is in the process of embracing our imperfections that we find our truest gifts: courage, compassion, and connection. Again, my embracing my role of acceptance helps me embrace others' imperfections. And I am less quick to blame, shame, or try and guilt anyone. That's been a very nice gift from that practice, my trying to practice that. Next, bottom of page 77, top of page 78 for the new, and it's the top of page 58 for the old. Based on my data, I don't think that some people are perfectionists and others are not. I think perfectionism exists along a continuum. We all have some perfectionistic tendencies. For some, perfectionism may only emerge when they're feeling particularly vulnerable. For others, perfectionism can be compulsive, chronic, and debilitating, similar to addiction. I like this idea. Now, I am less perfectionistic than I used to be, and in less areas of my life, but it still crops up occasionally. It still crops up. It still bites me in the butt every once in a while. But the more I practice it, the better I get at it. Next paragraph, last sentence in the next paragraph. A third of the way down on page 78 and about a third of the way down on page 58. Exploring our fears and changing our self-talk are two critical steps in overcoming perfectionism. Just increasing my awareness of how I am talking to myself has made a huge impact on me. The Toltecs call this the parasite, this voice that tears us down and is so hypercritical and so nasty. They call it the parasite. Some people, I've heard it called, like internal family systems, will call it the internal critic or the critical parent. But getting yourself to become aware of the way that you talk to yourself is transformative. Because I said the most horrible things to myself. No one could say the same kind of things to me that I said to myself. And becoming aware of it is the first step in being able to change it, confront it and change it. Next, on the bottom of page 58 in the old or the bottom of page 78 in the new, perfectionism didn't lead to results. It led to peanut butter. That, to me, that like just totally sums up the whole thing. It's so true. It is 100% true for me because I always failed. You can't be perfect. Perfectionism is a guaranteed 100% failure rate, which always led me back to the food. Next thing, about a third of the way down on page 59 for the old and mid page 79 in the new. When I interviewed women and men who were engaging with the world from a place of authenticity and worthiness, I realized that they had a lot in common regarding perfectionism. First, they spoke about their imperfections in a tender and honest way and without shame and fear. Second, they were slow to judge themselves and others. They appeared to operate from a place of, we're all doing the best we can. I have worked really, really hard to avoid judging others, and that is trickling down to being able to avoid judging myself. I had to work from the outside in here. I am less judgmental of myself now than I used to be. It still crops up. It still happens. But I have this saying that I really like. It's really helped me. And the saying is, we're all doing the best we can. It's just that some people's best isn't that good. So if someone's like, so assuming that someone who's being a jerk to you isn't doing the best they can that day and they're doing this on purpose doesn't serve me very well. It's judging that person and it makes me feel crappy. Saying, they're doing the best they can today. It's just not that great, but they're doing the best they can. That's a much more useful statement for me. It gets them off the hook. It gets me off the hook. I don't have to be mad. They don't have to be perfect. It just seems like a healthier way of approaching those kinds of situations for me. Next thing I want to read is bottom of page 59 in the old and mid page 80 in the new. According to Neff, Dr. Kristen Neff, self-compassion has 3 elements: self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. Okay, so I just wanted to set that up. Self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. We're going to take them one at a time. Self-kindness, being warm and understanding toward ourselves when we suffer, fail, and feel inadequate, rather than ignoring the pain or whipping ourselves with self-criticism. To me, self-kindness is like being a loving parent to myself. I ask myself, what would a loving parent say in this situation? And I'll ask my higher power, how can I love myself through this? How can I nurture myself through this? Next thing is common humanity. Now, common humanity recognizes that suffering and feelings of personal inadequacy are part of the shared human experience. Remembering not to compare my insides with other people's outsides, I used to think that people really had it together. Now I know no one does. We are all in this together. We all look stupid sometimes. We all fall short sometimes. We all are crazy sometimes. We're all in this together. And I'm no different than anyone else. Next thing is, oh gosh, it's 5 o'clock. Mindfulness. I'm almost done. Taking a balanced approach to negative emotions so that feelings are neither suppressed nor exaggerated. Not over-identifying or exaggerating my emotions has really helped me a lot. And it's a tricky balance that requires a lot of practice for me. I can get caught up on that, but not taking them too seriously and not ignoring them at the same time. That's a pretty tricky balance. Next thing I want to talk about is top of page 61 or the top of page 82. Perfectionism never happens in a vacuum. It touches everyone around us. We pass it down to our children. We infect our workplace with impossible expectations, and it's suffocating for our friends and families. Thankfully, compassion also spreads quickly. When we're kind to ourselves, we create a reservoir of compassion that we can extend to others. Our children learn how to be self-compassionate by watching us, and the people around us feel free to be authentic and connected. Compassion is contagious, but so is perfectionism. And I don't want to infect anyone else with that. Next thing, under the Get Deliberate section, the elements of self-compassion, self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness, and the things that get in the way, self-judgment, isolation, and over-identification. I like this summary. It makes sense to me. It's a nice and short, easy thing to remember. In fact, this is the good kind of thing to put on an index card and stick it on your mirror, so you read it every time you brush your teeth. And let's see, and the last thing I want to talk about is the very bottom of page 61 or the top of page 83. It reminds me that our imperfections are not inadequacies. They are reminders that we're all in this together, imperfectly, but together. Amen. That's all I've got.
See you next week.